Hi, this is Savannah Saunders from the Wonderful World of Dance, and today I'm so excited to be speaking with Emma Gladstone, Artistic Director and Chief Executive of Dance Umbrella, London's largest dance festival, running from the 11th to the 28th of October in the capital. So let's hear all about the festival. Hi Emma, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Savannah, very nice to be here.
So tell us all about this exciting festival.
Well, it's been going a very long time, this festival. We're 39 this year. I took over 4 years ago, and I'm really trying to push on two different areas. One is to get all the work that we invite out and about in the city. So we're doing quite a bit of touring this year, and we're going to 17 venues, including to Zone 5, which I'm really happy about. But also I'm excited to look at different kinds of choreography. So it's essentially a contemporary dance festival, but we've got lots of different styles within that, some flamenco, some where the audience put on headphones, different work for children with projection and digital. So it's important for me to show the range of what artists are making now.
And with almost 3 weeks of this amazing contemporary dance hitting the capital, what are some of your personal highlights that you would like to draw attention to?
We always do a free show a year, and we're opening the festival at Battersea Power Station and then touring that show Origami Down the River. And it's in a dancer called Sachinoro in a shipping container that opens up literally like a piece of paper, the metal moving, and she's dancing inside that and around it. And I love it as a piece of work because it's partly very spectacular, but not in a kind of tricksy way. The actual choreography is really good. It's rather meditative and calming because she's almost flying in the air. So that's going to be a really great way to start. And we've invited a guest programmer to come in this year, Freddie Apokuwadai. So I'm also really interested to see what he brings. There's several artists I don't know, I haven't seen the work, and he's got some bands on each night as well. That's at Rich Mix. So for me, I'm intrigued to see what different people he's bringing in to the mix.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see almost a whole range of work that most people wouldn't get access to be able to see.
Yeah.
And you talk about taking dance out of the theatres and out into areas, touring outside of London, Zone 5. We're not talking, for those who aren't in London, we're not talking about central London here. This is quite far out. How do you feel that taking dance out into the community and out to where people are makes a difference, or perhaps even affects the type of work that you would choose or show?
It's interesting. I don't know if it affects the kind of work I choose. I'm always looking for work that's distinctive, brave, personal, articulate. But I think for me, I'm interested in audience. About half our audience is a very dedicated dance audience who we value a lot. And certainly there's work for them in the big dance houses. So we're going to Sadler's Wells and we're going to the Barbican and other well-known venues in London. But I'm also interested in reaching people who might not either want to come into the middle or might not go into a dance house. So I think for me, it's not about the kind of work or the quality of the work, but the kind of politics of going to where people live and where we might put on work at an art centre that they would trust that art centre and maybe go and see dance when they wouldn't otherwise. So I'm really excited. We're partnering with a big visual arts fest called The Big Draw here for the first time. So that's an arts festival right through October, but it's not dance. We're also doing a debate at the National Theatre for the first time. So these things are interesting to me when we cross over into different art forms and different audiences that might go to those art forms.
Yeah, I think anything that can be done to bring new audiences to dance is obviously very, very important. I think also I'm interested to know a bit more about these pieces that are going to be presented in really unusual locations, like you say,
Yeah.
Battersea Power Station, and that piece you're talking about being inside of an opening shipping container sounds incredible. How do you feel that presenting works in these types of spaces affects the audience's experience of dance, or do you think it makes it more exciting for audiences to come along, or what do you think?
Yes, I mean, origami, for example, we're doing, it's outside and it's free, and 4 of the 5 venues we're going to are down the river. So I love the thought of people coming across things by chance also. Things that might be transformative by catching something that they didn't know what was coming in the city. And it's something I love about using the city as a location. So those sorts of venues are just really exciting for me. We're doing another piece in an area of wasteland right near City Airport in the east of London. I spend a lot of the winter every year. I seem to just be traveling around to desolate places. But we're working with this fantastic artist, Charlotte Spencer, there.
Oh, I've interviewed Charlotte. She's
Okay,
amazing. Is this for her
she's
piece? Is
great.
it a wasteland?
Yeah, that's
Is this
right.
a wasteland? I think it's
Is
called,
this
is
a
it?
wasteland? It's
Yeah.
called. And so that's also really interesting because it's going to be changing. That location is changing, and in a short amount of time, that will be used in a different way than it is next month. So I love that fact where people walking by, whether they go by on the train or walking, they will remember something that they experienced there that has now gone. And I quite like using the city as it's changing.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely amazing. And there's something about this intrinsic nature of dance that's almost within us. It's this almost natural language that we all have, even if we dance professionally, we don't dance at all. I think it's something which a lot of people can connect with, and
Yeah.
being able to, as you say, stumble upon or glimpse or experience these moments of dance everywhere across London will be amazing, particularly for free work as well, which is can also be a barrier for people being able to experience dance.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, how do you mentioned some winters you're traveling out to some desolate locations. As the artistic director, how do you go about curating such an extensive and extraordinary program?
I do a lot of research, basically. I travel a lot. I see about 200 shows a year. So it's partly looking for things that I think are commenting on today, that are contemporary, that are speaking about the world in which we're living now. That doesn't often mean overt politics, because I don't think dance does facts very well. I think it does suggestion, and I think it can do moods and states and comment in lots of different ways about the world around us. That's not necessarily politics with a capital P, but I'm interested in artists that are living in the current, in the present, and that's partly people inventing their own vocabulary, which I suppose for me is always the big difference between classical work and contemporary. Partly I'm looking for those things I mentioned before, work that's distinctive, that's personal, that's brave, that's articulate. Those are kind of some of the key things I look for. But also I'm very interested in diversity in all the different ways that you can call that. So some of it is about location, so going from the big houses to small art centres in outer London, whatever. Some of it's about style. Like I said, every year, we've had ice skaters, or we've had hip hop, or we've got modern flamenco now. It's that range excites me. And then also I'm looking at age. Always there's a couple of things for children. I feel really passionately we need to give young people the best art that we can now, not because they're going to be the audiences of tomorrow, but because they're living now. So I always have some work for younger audiences specifically. And finally, also things like gender and cultural diversity, just always in the mix. So I keep the frame quite tight, but we then try and tour the work as much as we can. So it is always a juggle. But it's an exciting one because it's the mixture that is also part of what I want to do, not just the quality or the scale.
You pick up on some really interesting topics there. First of all, gender and diversity in dance and in dance makers and the voice of dance. And this is an area that I'm particularly interested in, and we've talked quite a bit about on this program in relation to the challenges that female choreographers have been expressing in terms of their challenges.
Yeah.
The other, we'll come back to that. And the other thing that I picked up there for me is about the presenting work for children. I remember when I was growing up, I was dragged off to every festival in Australia and saw the most extraordinary range of works, not just dance, puppetry and theatre, which was really instrumental. I can still vividly recall works that I saw when I must have been 10 or something. And so I'm really interested in and I wasn't aware that Dance Umbrella is trying to, deliver works that would be, something for children. I think that's amazing.
It's something I've done for about 15 years now. When I was purely selfish. My daughter was 3, and there was nothing I could take her to, and I thought, this is mad. This is an art form that's to do with physicality in the body. And so when I was working at the place, and it was when I first stopped dancing, and I set up something called Offspring, which was a festival. It was the first sort of little festival of contemporary dance for kids, and I've done it ever since. Set up Family Weekend when I was at Sadler's Wells, which I'm really happy is still going on now. And so I'm doing 9 or 10 shows, international shows a year in the festival, and 2 of them are always for younger audiences. Some we've done really for babies. We did a piece called 16 Singers that was for sort of 6 months to kind of 3 years. It was really for very, very little ones. This year we've got a fantastic Spanish company called Company Medusa, who are doing a piece with projections called Dot, and that's touring around outer London. But again, I think it's really beautifully crafted, carefully choreographed, well performed work for children. And I was at a talk the other day when someone asked everyone who in the room if they to put up their hand if they'd got into the art form they were working in after they left school, and no one put up their hand, because so many of us get drawn into it when we're younger, either by studying or by watching, if we're lucky enough to have parents or carers that take us to things. And so that's why it feels really important to include them in the mix. They are the audience. They are part of the people who make up our society. 26% of young people, 64% of young people in London live in outer London, because it's very expensive in the city. So families generally live, as with many cities, a little bit outside the centre. So again, the tour that we're doing there is in outer London arts centres. There's a really clear reason why. But we've commissioned work and produced it, and I think it's a very key part of what I think we can do, not being in a building.
Yeah, absolutely. Dance Umbrella for families. That's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about gender and diversity, which is obviously a hot topic. Tell us about your personal professional views yourself, and also what Dance Umbrella is doing to have some positive impacts in this.
Yeah, it's such a big issue. It's such a continuing issue. I mean, I think the changes are coming. I mean, Saudi Arabia just allowed women to drive yesterday. So getting there. I think for me, as with any of these things, it's about just looking a little harder or digging a little deeper to find what you need. And I think 2/3 of the work this year is by women. I consciously try and look for work by women. It needs the extra push because the guys tend to be more on my case. It's really interesting. So
I've heard that before.
And so then it's something I do prioritize quite actively, and it changes each year, but I don't think it's never been below about 55% in terms of women. This year it's 2/3. Next year's looking a little bit more male. But generally, in terms of the support we can give, whether it's research, mentoring, advice, commissioning, I do try and focus on that, just to help rebalance the history a little bit. I think it's the legacy is also, if companies are doing revivals or remounting things, of course there's always so much more work by men. I'm also interested, I'm talking with a company next year about possibly putting on a piece they've done, and the name of the company is not the name of the woman who runs it. And often men tend to have the names of the companies in their name also. So it's an interesting thing for me about visibility, as well as about the data and the sort of number crunching of how much we balance it out. It's also to do with audiences, and I think that's why I feel like it's an issue that is, we work it's quite a democratic art form. I mean, if people want to go and see work, they pay to go and see work. And so for me, it's also interesting about how we as a society take women seriously, recognize female genius more slowly than male genius. Do we, these questions are, I find them really interesting. So it's not just about those of us that have the privilege of being in a position where we can share artists that we think are exciting with the public. It's also about the public and the press and how we are reviewed, and the funders as well. So it's a big, it's a big part of that discussion. I think it's really, really current here in the UK. The question of diversity is at every meeting I ever go to. So I'm hoping that there's change. There's been an interesting new appointment recently of the new director at the Young Vic Theatre here. And so in terms of both cultural and gender kind of balance, I think I'm hoping that we're heading in a slightly more even playing field.
Yeah, absolutely. I also hope that it continues to become more even and more reflective of the society in which we live.
Yeah.
I'm interested in your views also, with 30 years of experience in dance, performance and programming, and you were a dancer yourself. How do you feel that defining dance impacts what audiences see as well? Because, what is
Do you mean
dance?
how?
Yeah.
Do you mean how we write about it, or actually how we define the term?
The what is dance? The boundaries of what we would define as dance.
I find it quite. I don't. The term contemporary dance I don't like very much, and I don't use it much in print or on our website. I think it's a little off-putting for people. I always think people think, what is it? They don't know what it is. It's something, there's so many artists now working right at the edges, whether it's performance, live art, whether it's like Charlotte's making work with headphones, which is the piece is like a different kind of art form. It is made by a choreographer, and the way that you watch the piece and you go through the piece, I think she's using space and time in a totally choreographic way. But no one's dancing. We're moving, but we're not really dancing, and nor is she kind of choreographing us in any steps in sort of, she's guiding us in space to do things. But it's a different way of working, and all those people that are right on the edge are often the artists I find most exciting, the ones that are quite hard to define. A lot of that work is just something that I think is really interesting. So as a word, my edge in terms of programming is stuff that's led by movement. That's how I define it. It has to be led by movement. If the text is the key thing, it's not legitimate for me. But how you look at that movement is really how you can define that movement is really broad and wide, and the artists are stretching it to right to the edges of how we might define it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's always interesting when you see a piece and you sit there and think, is this dance? And I love that asking oneself that question actually asks so many other questions as well, and to be drawn into that internal sort of dialogue about my own thoughts about, well, what is dance, and what is legitimately dance, or why would this not be dance? It's an interesting, as an audience member, it's an interesting place to be in terms of thinking and challenging.
And I think we're asked it more and more often. We're doing a series of talks on Facebook Live called My Dance DNA, and we just did one with Siobhan Davis on Friday, and she was just talking about the beauty of everyday movement, of the miracle of just walking, and how we actually organize our bodies to do very everyday movement or pedestrian movement. So I think that's also interesting. She's a hugely experienced artist, and she's actually come back from dancing with London Contemporary Dance Theatre and Richard Alston, all these people, to actually looking at the real detail of daily movement. So that for me is quite an interesting journey, sort of back to the less choreographed from an audience point of view, but still totally to do with movement. So that range is fascinating.
Yeah, that would be quite an interesting view, I think. Pairing it right back to the physical mechanics of how we actually move. It's amazing, actually. I also wanted to ask about the impact of digital technologies on dance. Obviously, with the advent of social media, dance is more and more popular. I think particularly the visualization of dance, classical ballet mainly, is so prevalent across social media, and drawing in huge audiences or interest in dance. What do you see the impacts, both in terms of digital technologies on audiences' participation and access, but also in terms of how it influences work that is created and presented?
It's a huge question, I think.
Sorry, that was a big one.
I suppose what's interesting for me is where that crosses over into live performance. Actually, it's where it's I think when we're looking at stuff online, it's I think it's one of the most searched for things on Vimeo and YouTube, and it's watched hugely. So that's exciting in terms of people's appreciation, understanding, including historically being able to search back and look for things. I think programs here in the UK, like Strictly Come Dancing, they really help people understand technique and progression and learning in the body and technique. So all of those things I think are great. I don't know enough about the data about how and if those audiences then go to do dance themselves or watch it. So I think I suppose I'm such an advocate of the live experience that you can get, the impact that it has on you as a viewer, both in participatory work or in more traditional theatre spaces. So that's the connection that I find really interesting, is if and how it's going to translate into people actually seeing and watching and enjoying live performance. And my feeling
where they
is
can,
where they can, and my feeling is it will grow. I think, especially I keep hearing about all how we're going to get more and more robotized, whatever the word is. Just how robots are going to be taking more and more jobs in the next 20, 30 years. And I think it's going to push things back onto the human, onto the physical, onto the participatory, onto the things that connect us. So I'm quite excited about how culture as a whole, for people learning, doing, watching, studying, is going to be effective for the better as a result of that, because it is such a connector, I think.
Yeah, there is certainly nothing, I agree, there's nothing that can replace the personal experience of going into a space and seeing dance and being up close, particularly if you're lucky enough to be able to get up close to the artists and be able to see them live. There's nothing like that. I think it's great to be able to access dance if you don't live somewhere where there is arts available.
Absolutely. And the live streaming and the cinema stuff that's happening now is fantastic. I mean, at present it's still with the bigger companies and the bigger organizations, but I think that's changing. And like I was saying with our My Dance DNA talks, they're looking at inspirations of different artists using clips of films, both from their childhood or that they choose, of things that have inspired them, and then some of their own work. And it's a format that will only work digitally. It's just on Facebook Live, and we've done it particularly to look at choreography using the medium. So I think there's fantastic ways that we can do that with artists, with dancers, with people working in the profession in different ways. And that's quite an exciting journey for me.
Yeah, I think seeing, obviously, again, mainly ballet dancers who have got social media followings or, heading towards the million, like Mr. Copeland, for example. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, the amount of attention online in social media that dancers get, which is great. It's amazing. I think there's an interesting challenge around how contemporary dance is visually represented, because it doesn't quite break through and become as
I think we've got a lot to learn. I mean, we spend a lot of time in terms of promos for each show and just images and how we use them. I think it's one of the advantages we have actually over theatre, is just that obviously in image you can represent a lot about the style or the kind of work that you might be going to see. But for me, it's the invitation for people to take a leap, because we're not doing plays or there's no known writers, there's usually not any known titles, we don't have the stars that ballet have, because we don't generally choose to work that way. Generally the companies are working in a more collaborative way than having singular people that are being featured usually. So I think the invitation that we're making is quite different, and there's a lot we can learn about how to maximize that. I think that there is an excitement there. I was suddenly freed by the fact that most people don't know most of the names most of the time. So for me, it's going to be about reputation and invitation to the public. So that's how the marketing then becomes really interesting about how to do it truthfully but invitingly. And yeah, I think we've got a lot to learn still. I think there's appetite there. You know, when I
agree.
look at secret cinema, or all those places where you don't know where you're going and you don't know what you're getting, and I think it's one of our roles is to give people confidence to try the unknown.
Yeah. I personally, I don't really like to know very much about what it is that I'm seeing for the first time. I love the experience of not knowing and of being immediately absorbed into an environment. I tend to do most of my research after because I want that immediate personal impact of the piece, and not to be drawn in. Yeah, it's a personal thing, not to be drawn in by the knowledge that affects my interaction with the piece, or with the dancer, or with the choreographer. And I do often, and I've spoken to a few people in place, for example, about this challenge visually, because a lot of our followers, it's all about the visualization and all about these beautiful photos, and when you go and see pieces of contemporary dance or other types of dance, and you see something, you think, oh wow, that would be just, if only people would come and see this, they would just, it's incredible, because it is incredible. So yeah,
it's a very potent area. And in terms of my job, it's one that I feel I'm part of what I'm trying to do is connect audiences to artists. The kind of that area of how we promote and invite through the information, the images. It's a really, really big area, I think.
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
It is fascinating, and it's interesting as well for me that a lot of the dance photographers are now really famous. They are, they've got, again, hundreds of thousands of followers, and perhaps their reputation may be a gateway of being able to get engagement in the contemporary dance visualization. But again, it's about that fame, isn't it?
It is, but it's also about beauty, and I think that's, for me, I suppose I have lots of questions about these fit, young, trim bodies often, and how to try and show different kinds of grace, rather,
strength.
I suppose it's that the idea of beauty is often fairly constrained, I think. So I'm excited by different ways of looking at how we can look at the beauty of the power of the body in motion in different ways. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area.
Loaded.
Yeah, very, very, very much loaded. One which, will continue, no doubt.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask you, finally, as a female artistic director and CEO, which is a fantastic position, very inspiring, what advice would you give to either other artists who are leading dance organizations, or other people who are looking at you in your position and thinking, that's the type of thing that I'd love to do? What advice would you give to others?
Heavens.
Sorry, that's another big question.
It's something that's been interesting, that I've kept following my passion. It's been very simple in that sense. I've been given good breaks along the way, but I suppose I would advise people to keep following what they love doing best, because usually that is what you're good at also, and to just keep working hard and pushing forwards on following your heart, because it's all we have is that passion to offer and to share. I mean, artists, they don't really need my advice, that they're having the courage to do that anyway. But for those of us that are working in the creative field but not as makers, I think to keep true to yourself, including how you work with people, and actually what most excites you and drives you forward. Those things are fabulous. It's fuel to help change this world. And I think that's probably the most important thing.
That's fantastic. I just want to thank you very much for joining us and talking to us about Dance Umbrella. I'm really excited about it. I'm definitely going to come and see loads of the shows. And for listeners and viewers, if you want to learn either more about Dance Umbrella, the different types of shows, choreography, where you can see and buy tickets, visit danceumbrella.co.uk. and check out their socials for some of these Dance DNA talks and other snippets that you'll be able to find online. Thanks very much.